The first thing we normally do is to identify some of the key individuals, either in government, in the diplomatic corps, that we can go and sit down with, and they talk about, what they know on background, and that informs us. It is not for publishing, it's for informing us, because we need to be informed first as journalists before we can disseminate accurate information, and we owe that to the public, all of us. So I would really urge us to build this relationship with experts in your ministry so that we can have more collaboration, more information sharing, and that will really enrich how these issues are covered. The other one is also about data. You have the best data. We don't. We really need that data. We need the trends. We need to compare it 5 years, 10 years back. How are things going? What's your prognosis of a situation that comes up based on your experience over the years? And you have excellent experts who have been in the ministry for so long, who understand these issues. When we talk about off the record and background, we're not necessarily talking about, Bwana PS, you have been ambassador and, very experienced in many other areas, including politics. But there are those technocrats in the ministry who have a wealth of information that we can benefit from, off the record and on background. So apart from information sharing and data, we also really need access. Access to these areas, access to the newsmakers, and now that is when we come to the people who can go on the record. Access even to safe houses. Has anyone been to any safe house within the country? Any refugee safe house? We have safe houses. But it looks like my colleagues either are not aware or have just never been granted access to those safe houses. So if we are not able to see these things firsthand, how do we report them? What informs our reporting? The other one is, I would call for is embeds, more embeds with government. We do a lot of embeds internationally because some areas are just not accessible otherwise. When you talk about Ukraine at the moment, there are areas where you cannot go without, a military, in a military bubble or something like that. Closer home, the DRC, as I see some of my colleagues who have been there, there are areas that you cannot access without an embed. And therefore, when you're talking about, I know, you've come to speak about immigration, but it's really closely linked with conflict. If we cannot go as close enough to where it is happening, the source of, people migrating, people, having to flee their homes, then we do not do justice to the public. They cannot really get the depth of some of these problems. And I guess this is also a challenge to us as editors to make sure that we and our colleagues in the newsrooms are equipped for that, are trained for that. There are media houses that cannot deploy journalists to hostile environments without hostile environment training, because, no story is really worth a life, so it's important to back them up. And finally, my final point is on training, which I touched on at the beginning. How many of us have read the Refugee Act? By show of hands.